I told you I created a March Madness spreadsheet. What I did is I went in, I got the historical probabilities, and the probability that a 16 will beat a 1, that's only happened 1.3% of times. So you go all the way down, and the one that's almost 50-50 at the bottom there. And then I ran a random number, and just if the random number is below that number, the number 1 team won. If it was above that number, the number 16 team won. And then I just ran scenarios. So you can see, this is last year's. You can see my record, not too great. 24-8, 25-7, that's pretty good. 20-12, 23-9, 22-10. To me, the one that's 16-16, I've seen that a few times. That's, to me, pretty wild that you'd actually be 16-16. But then you do this year. First of all, the question is, how many times would I have to run this to get 32-0? What's the probability of 32-0? Any guesses? How would you figure that out? It's not a complicated math problem. Well, this is only one game. I'm just doing the first round. I'm not even sure how to set up the other rounds, because I don't know the probability if a 16 seed wins the first round, which only happens 1.3% of the time. What's the chance they win the next round? I don't have enough. My guess is that's probably 0%, but it's only happened. Yeah, the way I would do it is the product of all of these to the 4th power. So 3 out of 1,000 times. So I have to run this 1,000 times, and I might get 1 or 2 where I get 32-0. But would this perform better or worse than the average person? And that's what I don't know. I should try it. I have seen some, like right here. Perfect. Look at that. 1, 1, 2. Right here, every seed won, and my model predicted every seed would win. So that's just absolute perfection. But here, I thought 15 was going to win and 2 won. I thought 14 was going to win and 3 won. 4 I got right. You can see how bad that one was. Only got 2 out of the. So it's pretty tough. And that's just the first round. It gets harder as you go to the 2nd and 3rd and 4th round, because the teams are much closer. You essentially get to almost 50-50 at the end. And then it just becomes, the chances are, it'd be pretty frustrating, right? You go 32-0 in the first round, and then you lose the next game. But how much is it a skill versus luck? So Hubbard was saying, is there data we could get to improve? And what is that data? There are people who have been searching for that kind of data. I was noticing the Spurs have the 3rd worst record in the NBA this season, but they have the worst what? Where do they last place on? So the point difference, points per part. What's more important, point difference, or if 3 teams were within 3 games of each other, would the point difference be more important than the record? With the strength of schedule of the other team? What is it? So you can data mine and try to find what is it, what helps you. So that's what Hubbard's saying is there data we could get that would help us in this? So I think next year I'm going to submit my my card using this, but this is the year before last, which wasn't quite so crazy. But even then, there was pretty good. 26-6, that would look great. You look at 26-6. I got 1 9 seed right. Where else did I get? Here, I got a 10 seed right. That might be impressive. Here, people think I'm a genius here, right? I got a 12 seed right, that they won. And what would I do there? I say, oh, you know what? I was looking at the two teams, and I mean, people are just literally missing this team. I mean, they played so well against an opponent that have played their opponent 3 years ago, and and people think I was a genius. Pure luck. I mean, pure randomness. Of course, this 12 team, I completely missed. Here, look at there, boy, talk about a genius. So what do? You just make sure that's the only one they see. Right. Hey, I knew that 15 seed was going to win. I could just see it coming. But that's pretty good. 26 out of 20. 17 and 15. That's pretty good. But do you think you have skills that would be better than this model? So what does this model have that you don't have? Do y'all know the probabilities? And do people use the probabilities when they're making their guesses? What are people using? Come up with. Gosh, I remember the UT Alabama football game, and everybody's like, obviously Alabama was going to win, and they did win, but Colt McCoy got injured. But it was pretty interesting in the first quarter. It was pretty obvious UT was going to do a whole lot better. And if McCoy hadn't gotten hurt, it could have been a toss-up either team. But people were saying, yeah, it's obvious. How do you know it's obvious? These two teams haven't played each other. They both have really great records. How do you know, but people are saying, and we're going to talk about that when I talk about this one writer who talks about on being certain. How do people say they're so certain about something they can't possibly be certain about? How confident you are that if the 1 seed is going to win or the 16 seed, you're pretty confident, but every once in a while it doesn't happen. But we talk as if we're 100% confident. That's what he's saying. We're overconfident. Hubbard's saying we're overconfident in our predictions, much more than allowed. At least here we know, on the 8 and 9, it's a toss-up. We could just flip a coin, but what information can we get that would actually make us better at picking the 8 versus the 9 team? And is there information? Is there information that's going to give you 100% confidence? Probably not, because there's a lot of games that end on the last shot. I don't know anyone that says, well, yeah, my model said that last shot was going to go in. There's no way your model's that good. But anyway, but y'all see how you do it. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Just a good old random number generator, and you got the probabilities. I was able to I knew I could find this. I just Googled it, and sure enough, how often does a 1 seed beat a 16 seed? And sure enough, it gave me all the history. So it was pretty easy to get the data. Now, how sure am I that the data I was getting was actually correct? Who knows? I'm not going to go do research on that. So I'm just assuming whoever put that down, probably it's correct. They had no reason to lie, I wouldn't think. But anyway, so there's my model. How much money would you bet that you could beat me next year? What was y'all's record on the first round? You may know. I think I was 23 and 9. So this would have beat me in that one. All right, well. All right, so let's I can't decide if I want to do Annie Duke first, but y'all just finished watching Kahneman and Hubbard. So let's do them first, and we'll come back to Annie Duke. Did any of y'all go watch the Kahneman Taylor debate yet? Did y'all? It's kind of a long, hour long, but it's pretty fascinating, I think. So he's not an economist. He's not a finance person. He's a psychologist. I think he's the only Nobel Prize winner in economics that's not actually in economics or finance. But behavioral economics is his thing before that was even a thing. A lot of empirical analysis. Some of the things they do, pretty bizarre experiments. So thinking fast and slow. I don't know if these even work anymore, so I gave you all the new links. So he talks about bounded rationality, and economists like say we're maximizers. Bounded rationality says no, we don't have enough time. You're not going to go to HEB and look at all 50 boxes of cereal and make the absolute best economic decision on which cereal to buy. You don't have that kind of time. You're just going to grab a box. Probably marketing is going to influence you or whatever. You're not going to buy the HEB box because that's got to be no good. You're going to buy Kellogg's or whatever you're going to do. Is that a bad way to do it? Well, you're talking what, 20 cents? Who cares? Not a big deal, not important. So we make decisions not optimally, but given our time constraints. And y'all probably heard this term, satisficers. Good enough. We're going to make decisions that are good enough, and that's probably perfectly fine most of the time. But what happens when we take this good enough decision making and then we start using it in the really critical stuff? We're making these huge errors. That makes a difference. So he talks about there's intuition and there's, which is fast thinking, fast decision making, and the slow, more analytical. The fast is, you hear a noise in the brush, you assume it's a lion and you run. That's the fast thinking. That's probably good. False positive. You don't want a false negative. No, that's not a lion. That's a lot more serious than a false negative. That is a lion and you run. So that's the fast intuitive. So our fast intuitive is set up for survival and those type of things. The slow analytical, where we're doing essentially what Hubbard was saying, that's the slow thinking. What he says is we use the intuitive thinking a lot more than we think we do, especially Hubbard says that. Because with the fast thinking, we make a lot of systematic errors, a lot of biases. We perceive changes a lot better than we perceive states. We make decisions in contrast with what we have just experienced rather than assessing the absolute values. We overstate losses and understate gains. And this example I always use, Susie went from 100,000 to 105,000, 110,000. Mike from 100 to 450 to 125. So you ask, who's happier? You say, well, obviously Mike's happier. He has more money. And that's the right answer. But who's really happy? Obviously Susie. She didn't lose $300,000, $325,000. But Mike should be happier, right? But our brains are much more conditioned to changes than we are to absolute values. What's Susie going to say? Oh, I actually made money last year. Is she going to say, I only have 110,000? No. What's Mike going to say? I don't want to talk about it. But he's better off. If they actually sit and talk about it, he discover, hey, I'm 15,000 better off than you are. So a lot, what are you bragging about? But we do. We brag about. She's going to brag about stuff she shouldn't brag about because he's better off. Framing is it's pretty ridiculous. Some of the studies they've done on framing, just having people write the last 2 digits of their social security number radically changes their expectations of something completely unrelated. You ask them, what's the probability of this or this? If their last 2 digits are a low digit, they'll write a low probability. If it's high, that our brain shouldn't think like that, but it definitely influences that. Mental accounting, we tend to segregate things we shouldn't segregate. Availability heuristic. There's certain things that our mind thinks of and causes us, because they come to our mind quickly, causes us to make decisions that are just not statistical at all. We tend to really discount the distant future dramatically, even though it's gonna hit us. We just say, hey, 10 years from now, who cares? I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. He talks about averages versus sums. I don't know if that made sense to you, what he's talking about with the dishes. And I think that one's actually a pretty important one because we use this a lot in finance. It's pretty easy for us to look at a set of numbers and say, oh yeah, that's about 7 on average. To add them all up takes a lot more mental agility. So yeah, here's the 2 sets of dishes. So this is an actual experiment that he ran. So this is real life stuff. Hubbard talks some about this. I thought it was interesting that Hubbard, one of the things I really got out with him is a lot of people say, hey, if something's really uncertain, you need a whole lot more data. And what does he say? When something's really uncertain, very little data is extremely valuable. It's the exact opposite of what we think. So he gave the example of the marbles. Y'all remember that? One marble gives you a 75% information. That's pretty good information just with one sample size. And in fact, the more uncertain you are, the more helpful that little bit of information is. Confidence and hypothesis largely determined by the proportion of evidence supporting it. You see, Tversky's name come up. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but you know, it's pretty interesting, just some of these experiments. And, you know, part of it's them thinking of these experiments. So the economists say we think like this. How can we test that? So you had to come up with these. We know there's a problem when you test these things, because when you test stuff, people are different than when you're not. You know, the fact that you're testing them, they're probably not going to act the way they would in real life. So who knows how realistic these are. But weak correlation between accuracy and confidence. Yeah, and this, are y'all familiar with I just forgot the name of it. Bayesian logic. Do y'all use Bayesian logic? I don't know if they teach a logic class at UTSA. I may know if they do. I think I've talked about this. It's probably too late for y'all. Y'all are graduating, but I would strongly recommend finance students take a logic class. I took 6 hours at UT Austin. Oh my word, they're very, very valuable. In Bayesian logic, they should teach a Bayesian logic class, because we violate that dramatically. But here, say Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, very bright. She majored in philosophy as a student. She was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, also participated in anti-nuclear demonstration. What's the probability? Linda is a bank teller and an active feminist. Linda is a bank teller. Which of these got the higher probability when asked? Linda's a bank teller and an active feminist, or Linda's a bank teller? Not when people ask them together, but when they ask one group, what's the probability she's a bank teller or active feminist? They give a higher probability to that. Which is more likely? That she's a bank teller and a feminist, active feminist, or that she's a bank teller? Which is more probable? The latter one has to be, right? They've done the same test on an airplane. Say, how much would you pay for insurance that protects you from a terrorist event on an airplane? And then they'll say, how much would you pay for insurance for an airplane crash? And which one did they pay more money for? One, they said terrorism. That's that availability heuristic. That doesn't make any sense, right? One that covers you for any crash, another one that only covers you for a terrorist event, and they were paid more for the terrorist event. You can see the human brain. We hear certain words, it just doesn't make sense. And Bayesian logic, you know, they'll give you some of these things, and they'll say, what's the probability she's a librarian? And you say, yeah, there's a good chance she's a librarian. Well, no, there's very few librarians in the United States. She's much more likely to be a bank. You know, there's a lot more bank tellers than there are librarians. But we don't think that way. We look at these words that give us certain biases, and we certainly jump instead of the Bayesian logic. You say you start with the known population, and you don't leave that. I don't know if y'all saw this one in the happiness one. This one's kind of interesting, wasn't it? Y'all remember this one? Which patient would you rather be?
I think that patient A is a lot more unhappy because experiencing a lot more, and what that experience.
Well, the end is much worse, right?
Yeah. And then obviously patient B is much worse.
What if they ask you in advance, which do you have to be one of those two? Which would you choose?
Much shorter, but if patient B said that patient B was patient A was a lot more happy.
They're willing to do the event again. Why? Because the end of it was much less, and that's that change in stuff. You know, our brains are really strange things. I would much rather be A too if you told me in advance. I would just kind of prepare myself for it, but huh? Well, the pain's the same in both of them.
I know, but you said the duration. I just figured ran out of things in one reading.
No. He completed it.
Oh.
No, he completed it. It's just that the most painful part was right at the end. So they both have the same level of pain. If you look at it, the pain, that max pain is exactly the same in both. The only difference is this guy had pain for much, much longer. But this person's pain was the worst at the end. This person's pain was the least at the end. And this person says, yeah, I could do that again. That wasn't that bad. This guy's saying that's the most horrible thing. It's just the way our brains work. He's real famous for prospect theory. I can never remember prospect theory. I'm always like, you know, that thing. But prospect theory, you probably have seen this chart. It's a pretty important chart. We tend to hate the downside a lot more than we enjoy the upside, and it makes us make some pretty interesting decisions. We hate losing more than we like gaining. They've done some experiments with this where they'll give students, half students they'll give a mug, the other half they'll give t-shirts, and they'll try to get them to swap. And the people with the mugs like, no, I'm not giving up my mug. And the people with t-shirts, no, I like this. Why? Because that's what they have. And losing that t-shirt is like, no, this t-shirt is my favorite t-shirt my entire life. It's like, we just gave you a random t-shirt, but no. The other, the mug people are like, man, no, this mug, I've never had a mug like this ever before. Now we had the guy from United coming. I don't think you want to ask him this question, but I've always wondered if airlines should use behavioral economics. Hopefully he's going to talk about being, I mean, you hate it when they kick you off the plane because some United employee has got to get to the next place. So you get kicked off the plane or they overbook. And so they say, hey, we'll offer $100 if anyone will change flights. $300. How many people come forward? Nobody. Why doesn't anybody come forward? Because it's been expressed to them as a loss of a flight seat. You tell someone, are you willing to give up your flight? What did he just say? Will you give up your t-shirt? They say, no, I'm going to go to my grave with this t-shirt. Could they change that in another way? I always wondered, what if they texted people and said, hey, you now have a $500 voucher. You lose it in 15 minutes if you don't take it. To get it, all you have to do is delay your flight to 2 hours, which you know. Could they change it so that the voucher is what they're losing instead of the seat? And would that change? You know, have they, you know, obviously they must experiment with that. Would that change your thinking? So so-and-so, you're, you know, we picked you randomly and you just won a voucher. And you think about it, like, you know, $300 voucher, you're talking people that probably don't make more than $20, $25 an hour, maybe $30 an hour. They just got something that's really quite valuable to them. They should take it. There should be a way to get that. And that's part of what he's talking here. You know, if you can express it, word it in a way that they're losing what you want them to you know, to be worried about, you could win that. So, but I don't know what, you know, y'all can ask him that question. Just don't assign it to me. I don't want to be as, so yeah, that's that question. I don't know, might work. And then it's experience versus memory. I just find I've lived my whole life like that and didn't even realize I had a Nobel Prize winner supporting me. But yeah, I think it's absolutely the case. I think you should rework your whole life around this. One of the reasons I retired at 46 was I got tired of people in October saying, I can't believe it's October already. This year has just flown by. Like, why did it fly by? And I finally figured out why the years fly by. They fly by because there's so little variety. We're doing the exact same thing every day. We can't distinguish. So what happens, it's like the worst case. The day goes on forever, but the year goes really fast. And it's like the exact opposite. So I switched all around, so my days go really fast, but the year seems forever. Why? Because my days are so varied. I think you should do that. I wish we'd done that at UTSA. I wish what I'd done is like every day pick a complete stranger at another department and say, hey, I really want to know what your department is doing. Could we go on break today? I just want to hear what you're doing. A different person every day. Go outside, do something different every day. Just break up the day. Have a different lunch group every day. You know, just change it up all as much as you can. I like what he says on vacations. I've always done that. Don't ever go on vacation with me because you're going to be absolutely exhausted when you get back. But it's very, the people who went to Costa Rica, right? So if you go on a 2-week vacation to the coast, that's not going to be any different than a 2-day vacation to the coast in your memory. You go to with me to Costa Rica, you're going to remember that trip every single day because every day was really different, wasn't it? Yeah, Oliver was riding bikes up these mountains with me. Very, very different every day. We did something radically. That's how I do all my vacations. It's every day is something radically different, and I remember them in quite a bit of detail. I rode my bike in all 50 states, and I can remember in detail almost every single state and what ride I did because they're all so different. So I'm a big believer in variety. You got to do variety. I have students say, oh, I don't want to leave San Antonio. It's like, no, you got to move. You got to move. You got to change where you're living. Move your kids. If you want your kids to remember their lives, they should go They should be in a different city every grade. You don't have to change cities, just move to another house. I sure, why can't you remember high school so much? Because freshman, sophomore, and junior, they're so different years, aren't they? And then you go to work and every year is the same. How do I remember my work life at USAA? It was Life Company, Capco, investment, I remember it. The 7 years I've spent in Capco is the same in my memory as the 9 months I was in the investment company. The exact same memory. Why? Because of the change. So your brain focuses on variety and change. You should incorporate as much of that in your life as you can, because you remember stuff. And then when you get to be 70-year-old, it feels like a much longer life, like you got a lot more done just because of all that variety. I mean, I think it's absolutely important, critical. So it's the number of instances of positive feelings. It's not the intensity. I had one student come back. He was so depressed. He got married, bought an expensive car, bought an expensive house. His wife made him buy an expensive house because she let him buy the expensive car. So they're destroying each other financially. It's like, what do I do now? I says, well, it's kind of late now. Well, let's date this debt. Yeah, don't go from the $20,000 car to the $80,000 car. That's not gonna. Now go from 20 to 30, 30 to 40. Give yourself more scale. Unless you're like, if you're worth 3 billion and you're done for it, because then you're not gonna have any increments. But so it's not the intensity. You should try to increase, just a number of things. I splurge on travel. I love travel, but for every trip I do is just something incredibly radically different. I remember I went to Utah this last year to visit alums, and my bike broke. And there's a bike spot across the street, and they had mountain bikes, but they didn't have road bikes. So I got a mountain bike, and I was going to do road biking. Instead, I found this incredible mountain biking thing, and I was 8 hours out there just having a blast. It's like, that's how you do vacations. When I went to Vegas, guess what I did in Vegas? What do you do in Vegas? I went biking in the desert. It was incredible. It's an incredible experience. Yeah, it's just like, I remember that. I could have sat there gambling for 4 days. I would have been like 3 seconds in my memory. So plenty of mildly good news is preferable than a single lump of great news. So he's done a good job of really understanding how the human brain works. How do you remember your life? I mean, it's pretty incredible stuff. All right, then you get to Hubbard. I don't remember where Hubbard here is in my notes. That might be just be his presentation. Yeah, I have to get to his presentation. So, all right. So the most important decision your firm makes is how you're going to make decisions. What's the highest priority project that you have? How do you prioritize projects? The firms really scrutinize how we're making decisions, and is this really the optimal way to make decisions? A lot of stuff just kind of just happens. Like, yeah, we're just this way. We've always done it. He talked about how firms make decisions. You'll see a lot of those. I love what he says about the intuition. What is intuition? Intuition is just experience, but with really bad memory and really bad biases. So it says, oh, we can't use a model. We can't use statistics for that. We don't have information. We'll just use my experience. Like, well, your experience is the same thing, but just with a lot of garbage added to it. So, I'm sorry, Diego, you were asking me something. I can't forget.
Oh, yeah, like, you were answer, what's that, ask like how as biking affected your life? Because you were mentioning that you need to create like positive memories. So
Well, it's not biking. It's a combination of things. So I don't go biking. I go listen to podcasts. I'm reading books, to me. So in my opinion, if you're sitting at a desk doing something you could do while you're on a bike, then you need to go get on a bike. All right. If you're going to try to get to know someone's job at work, don't go to the desk and sit there and say, hey, I visited a alum at Valero. And he said, hey, I want to tell you about my job. So we went out and we walked the trail of Valero around. If you're sitting doing something that you could be walking where you're doing it, that's why I'm not a swimmer. what can you do while you're swimming? You know, can you listen to podcasts while you're swimming? There probably can, but I haven't figured that out. So to me, I'm doing a lot of stuff, but I also vary the bike ride up quite a bit, just especially when I travel. But yeah, I mean, it's multitasking, but multitasking and doing different things. Yeah, so you'll see these different ways of making decisions that firms do. You should ask, is it actually effective or not? How should decision-making methods be evaluated? And he says they should be evaluated based on what? Is the firm better off? Is the decision quality better? That's not how we do it. In fact, we rarely go back and assess our decision-making abilities. I do think there's something more important in all of this, which is, you know, what is your purpose? Why are you there? What is your firm trying to accomplish? I do think we did a case, they do a case in the EMBA on Robinhood, where Robinhood, you know, he's got all these people out there robbing. They used to rob from the rich and give the poor, but he got too many fellow men, whatever he calls them. So now they're robbing from everybody. So now he's got this whole apparatus he's just feeding. His original goal was political reform. He's not doing that. He's not robbing the rich to give the poor. Now he's just robbing everybody to feed this machine. No one has stopped to ask, what are we doing? So he's created his monster. And so I think firms get to that point where it's like, we're just surviving now. We just got to feed this machine, whatever it takes, feed this machine. I said, at that point, just shut it down. And I think some charities are like that. I think unions can be like that. Trade groups can be like that, where you're like, what are we doing here? What was our original purpose? So figure that out first. Make sure you're doing something that is actually of value. Yeah, so intuition versus and human experts and all that. He says, get some math, just get some data. What are the 3 limitations of using experience rather than data to make decisions? I can't remember what his answer was on that, but he talks a lot about the weaknesses of experience. I had a guy working for me that wanted a little bit of extra experience, and our boss was running the bank's portfolio. And there's no reason for him to run it. We could have given it to the investment company, but it was like his baby. So he was going to train us. And his training was, he threw a bunch of bonds at us and said, which one would you pick? With no guidance. He didn't tell us what the portfolio's goal was, what its purpose was, or anything. And so I said, okay, it's all yours. You can try to figure it out. And it was really frustrating. But then one day a light bulb come on. And he goes, yeah, I finally figured it out. Every time this number does this, he buys the bond. When it doesn't, he doesn't. It was a real simple thing. And I don't think the guy he was doing this for actually even knew that. I'm gonna put this on. Hopefully he doesn't see this video, but I don't think he even realized that. I think he thinks he had this intuition and his all sophistication, and this guy figured out, no, it's a real simple thing. He didn't tell the guy he figured it out, but he started going to the office and going, yeah, I'd pick bond A instead of B. He says, yeah, that's right. You're starting to get it. You're starting to be as smart as I am. Like, no, I'm comparing these 2 numbers and picking, was it all that good or greater decision? Who knows? He lost that portfolio, went over to the investment company later, and they radically changed what he was doing. But who knows? But a lot of times we think we're doing some fancy, wonderful things, and it's actually an incredibly simple algorithm. I think sometimes we're making the experience, intuition decisions that if we actually wrote down how we're making decisions, we'd be really embarrassed. It's like, oh wow, that's really simple, but we feel like giants if we don't at least write it down. Now, do you agree with this? I don't know if I can show you. Maybe I can show you. Yeah, I don't remember where I put it. Yeah, I put it in one of my classes, but so I did one of these Kahneman things, and it's pretty simplistic and pretty eye-opening. So he'll ask 10 questions, and he'll ask you. So he'll say, in what year did Mozart die? And you got to get it 90%. What would you guess? Ludwig. Huh? 1863. But give me 2 days. So give me the 90%. What's the earliest it could be? Or I'm assuming that's your late number. So what's the earliest it could be? Okay, that's pretty wide, friends. So you do that, that's definitely, you're definitely got that one. So that's in that range. So yeah, so, but he gives a lot of questions. You feel kind of, I mean, that one I kind of know because I'm a music major, but other ones that would be really easy for Sebastian, I wouldn't have a clue on. I forget some of the ones they ask, like how much does a baseball weigh or something? I don't know. It's like, do you want ounces or pounds or I don't know, what do you want? But the first time you do it, you're wrong like 40% of the time. And you're wrong. I mean, your range is too narrow most of the time. And so then you keep doing it. You should be right 90%. You shouldn't be right 100% of the time. You shouldn't say between 5000 BC and 2023. Because if you do it right, you should be right 9 times and wrong 1. Most people are right 6 times and wrong 4 times. So the ranges are too narrow. But after you do this exercise over and over again, you feel so stupid. And he's like, doesn't even care if you know anything. He just wants to get you calibrated. I'm thinking, man, how can I not know this? But yeah, sure enough, after about 4 or 5 rounds, you're right 9 out of 10 times. It's pretty amazing. You don't go too wide. He does get you. Now, my question to him would be, does that actually carry over in the other decisions? Does it retain? Do you keep that? But you start learning pretty quickly that you need to be wider in these ranges. And that's what he's showing here, is people say they're 90% confident and they're actually only 60%. So he's shown this over and over again. It's pretty easy to recreate what he does. You just come up with a bunch of random questions and they have numbers because you have to put a range in it. Why are bookies better? They gave up. I remember a couple of the reasons there. Instant feedback. I think that's the main reason. I think he got 2 reasons he wasn't expecting, but yeah, instant feedback. They do it a lot. They what? Yeah, skin in the game. Yeah, so the skin in the game, and they do it all the time. I think the main thing he was talking about was instant feedback, where the point he's making is a lot of times we're making decisions with 0 feedback. We don't know if the decision quality was any good or not because we're not getting any feedback. I can't remember some of the answers to these. Y'all remember these? Biggest problems with quants?
The accuracy of the one that really accurate.
Oh, spending too much time. Yeah, I can't remember. I remember listening to it just yesterday, but I can't remember. Huh?
Like they use the wrong information. Think about it. But then, like,
Oh, the wrong distribution or
They are basically telling them that they use models that are less sophisticated than they should be.
Hmm. The one thing I like is what he says about actuaries, because I've worked with actuaries. Actuaries have this incredible insistence on doing the math correctly. And my frustration with them is I couldn't get anything done because they're like, no, we got to get it. We got to be in. It was really sitting down and saying, is this really correct? Is this the right model? Is this the right distribution? Let's make sure. Let's double test it. Triple test it. I like that, but it is frustrating because it takes forever to get anything done. So I highly recommend that you read his book. He talks here about the value of information. You may have had a stats class on that. You know, how much would you spend for the information? And his point here is you don't need 15 pieces of information. The first 4 or 5 gets you really far up. So you don't think you got to spend a bunch of money. I've had this debate with accountants. A lot of accountants think more details is more accurate. There comes a point where the more detail is just not that more accurate. Y'all remember what AIE stands for? I can't remember that. I think that's economics. All right. Yeah. You definitely need to read. You need to read 2 of his books, How to Measure Anything, and the Failure of Risk Management. I'd be careful with the failure of risk management having that sit on your desk if you get an entry-level job somewhere, because it's a little bit of a kind of a touchy subject. be careful with actuaries, especially. Actuaries know they don't make the mistakes Caleb talks about. And they're worried you think they do. And so you're going to have a debate with them and they'll probably win that debate because they are. I was surprised they said actuaries are really good, but engineers are not. I would hope engineers would be as good as actuaries anytime I'm driving over a bridge or in an elevator going up to the 100th floor. I hope engineers are as precise as actuaries, but who knows? All right. Any comments on Hubbard? Wasn't too complex of a presentation, right? He's not telling you got to have a PhD in math. He's giving you some pretty simple ideas. What I'd strongly recommend you do is in your first job, find out who those quant people are. So my approach was I wasn't going to talk to the actuaries so I can become as strong in math as they were because that wasn't possible. My goal in talking to the actuaries, and I did all the time, and they didn't get tired of me at all. It was pretty amazing. And I think you'll find this quantitative people, they know they're smarter than everybody else. They know the whole firm just collapses if they leave, they mess up, but no one gives them any respect. And when you show up as, man, I want to learn everything you know because you're so important, you know, they eat it up, they love it. They love having mentors or mentees. And I found that with the actuaries at USA, it's just all of them, the life actuaries, the P&C actuaries, the benefit actuaries, they're like, you know, we could destroy this company tomorrow. You're so lucky we're here, but you don't seem to even know we're even. And that's true. That's true at USA. The actuaries are doing stuff, and everybody else is like, man, we just hope they know what they're doing because we have no clue what they're doing. But it's just complete total reliance on that group. And I don't know if any of y'all work with engineers. Is that not true with engineers? Are engineers like, that's enough. That's enough wire. That bridge should hold. Aren't they more precise than that? I would hope.
Depends on what they're working on.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. Okay. And he's got all these studies. You might have noticed he had that Tetlock in there. I mentioned Tetlock. I haven't read a Tetlock book yet, so I'm tempted now to see if I can find one that's got an audible version to it. Would be interesting. Tetlock may be a little bit too mathematical to be reading while riding a bicycle. All right. Well, let's do Annie Duke. I mean, unless y'all have any other comments. Would you want to invite Doug Hubbard to your company? Have him do an analysis? I wanted him to come to UTSA and do a class, but just couldn't get it to work out. Huh? Well, that's his firm. Yeah, I mean, you heard he has workers, people working for him. He has actuaries working for him. No, I think he's still working. Well, that video is a little bit old, but he doesn't look that old to me. He looks like he's a lot younger than I am. So I assume, and he's not doing this for the money. He eats this up. And when I talked to him, it was pretty hilarious. I mean, his secretary says, yeah, he's in his office. Do you want me to transfer you in? Can you imagine? Like, well, yeah, of course. And then the first thing he says, well, I'm running to a meeting. How much time? And he just kept talking and talking and talking. And every 20 minutes, he'd say, I got to run to a meeting, so I can't talk much longer. And he kept talking and talking and talking. I was like, I'm not keeping you from your meeting. And you should see him on pretty hilarious on Amazon. People will comment on his book and he'll write a book and a response, and then they'll make one comment, he'll write another book, and they'll finally say, I give up, I don't want to talk to you anymore. But he's just so in, and it's not like he's debating them, like they're challenging him. He doesn't do that. He's like, I see your point, but have you thought about that? I mean, he's really, so to me, he's like the perfect boss. He loves what he's doing. He wants to teach people. So yeah, I wish I could get him on campus. He'd be a great professor in this field. All right, we talked about those books. All right, so behavior economics and finance, what are you going to do with it? It's a growing field. We still haven't quite figured out exactly how it impacts our models and our formulas. It probably provides a better understanding of economics, of markets, of human decision-making under uncertainty, which is, I'm going to argue, all decision-making is under uncertainty. If you had certainty, there's no decision. So You don't need to make a decision. I know for sure if I go left, I die. If I go right, I live. I got to sit down and make a decision. If you have that uncertainty, go right. You have that, for 100%. How we make decisions is not consistent with theoretical, rational decision-making assumptions underlying models of economics and markets. That doesn't necessarily mean you throw them out. It does mean that the models should be questioned and maybe not over relied on. And this is to me, I think the most important thing for you in your life. I just talked about it with vacations and other things. You got to improve decision-making so that you're on a different path. Short term, it doesn't make much difference, but over 10 years, if you change the way you make decisions, you're going to be in a radically different spot than you would be if you didn't. And that's kind of the point. That is the point Annie Duke is making. So there's Thinking Fast and Slow, and there's Michael Lewis. I do like this book. I'm not a big Michael Lewis fan, but I do like that book. And then Dr. Lowe has gotten in on this with the adaptive markets. What he's trying to do is take a lot of behavioral finance and create a whole new model, a whole new way of thinking. I don't think he's quite there with adaptive markets, but he's trying to. But he does have some interesting, when you read through it, he has some interesting perspectives that at least will make you think differently, even if you don't specifically apply what he's doing. James Montier, one of my favorite writers, I have read this book. It's a pretty decent book. But how do you specifically use behavioral finance as an investor? So he calls it the little book of behavioral investing, how not to be your own worst enemy. And here's how to measure anything, and then thinking and bets, making smarter decisions when you don't have all the facts. So decision making under uncertainty. There she is. I don't know, I haven't gotten a more recent picture of her. Professional poker player, which I guess I didn't realize there were professional poker players. Played for 20 years, made $4 million in winnings. It's really interesting. One of her big wins, her strategy, very statistical strategies. So she came into the game knowing I'm the inferior player. The person I'm playing is a much better player. However, there's a strategy that doesn't win very often, but if I play it, when it does win, I'll win big. So I'm probably going to lose if I do the traditional and play the way normally, but if I go off on this 20% tangent, and if that works out for me, I win. And that's what she did, and she won. And the guy is like, yeah, I had it. So he actually gave him a chance, a higher probability of winning, but she picked the one that gave her the better chance of winning by not matching skills. And so she asked, is there stuff I learned in poker that you're going to apply to decision making in life? Poker is like life, but much more compressed. The statistics, the biases of poker, the reasoning errors that we make, the strategies for improvement, she says are similar between poker and life. You may not believe that. We played poker when I was a kid, but I don't think we had a clue what we were doing. So I don't know if I could do that. She contrasts that with chess. Chess master always beats the novice. The loser in chess knows what his mistakes were. A loser in poker can't necessarily point that they made a mistake. They may just, they drew a 4 instead of a king or whatever. It's just pure luck, or the person they're playing against just happened to draw the ace. So they made everything they did was exactly right, and they lost. That's not true in chess. You do everything exactly right in chess, you're going to win. So she's saying you can't use chess to as an example for decision making. The loser in chess knows what they did wrong. A poker novice can beat the master, and the loser in poker can always clearly see their errors. A poker player can make all the right decisions and lose. Poker also involves the human element. I don't know if you've ever seen a chess game where they're trying to bluff each other. That seems a little bizarre, doesn't it? I'm going to play my pawn now. Nope. I think they'll say, okay, well, you played the other one. All right. I mean, it's like not all that great of a bluff. That's why they wear sunglasses or whatever they do in poker to try to hide their expressions. Poker involves bluffing, anticipating the other player. Thus, poker involves a human factor not seen in chess. Now, she's talking about a bet. So what is a bet? A bet is not just gambling. A bet is any decision about an uncertain future. The fact that you drove your car tonight instead of taking the bus, you made a bet. The fact that you're a finance major instead of an accounting major, you're making a bet on an uncertain future, you know, all these kind of things, all these decisions you're making. Y'all heard how I made my decision, you know, not much thought about it. We can treat all decisions as a bet, given that all decisions involve uncertainty. There is often a weak connection between the quality of decisions and outcomes, and that's why we fool ourselves. We're looking at the quality of the decision, not the outcome, and yet, at least short term, there can be almost seem like there's no relationship. We made a really high quality decision and it didn't work out. That's because a high quality decision had a 55% chance of happening. It was the right decision, but the 45% happened. Doesn't mean you made the wrong decision, just means that highly likely but less than 50% thing happened. We tend to assign decision quality to our good outcomes. So our ego takes over. When things work out well, it's like, yeah, man, I knew, you've heard people say that. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. You've heard people say that when there's no way they knew that was going to happen. I won't recommend this book because it's a little cumbersome. See if I can find it. There's a book called On Being Certain. I enjoyed it, but it's a little tedious. And what he's writing about here is this happened. It's only $12, so you might as well get it. Why not? But it's the thing he's noticed as human beings that we're 100% certain about stuff. There's no reasonable reason we should be 100% certain. I have many friends on Facebook that are omniscient, and it's amazing because some of my omniscient friends actually disagree with each other. It's like, but they're 100% certain they're right. You know that it's true for all of us, right? We come to the point where we're just absolutely certain. He gives some examples that are a little freaky. Y'all don't remember the Challenger disaster because you weren't alive then. But you asked me, where were you when anybody know the Challenger disaster? It's a pretty sad event, right? All these school kids are watching this on TV. I forget whom they were watching, school teacher or something, but yeah, all these schools, and then it crashes, it blows up. So pretty tragic. You asked me where was it? I think I know exactly where I was. I was on UT campus. I was walking to the business building, and these two guys go by, and one of them says, "Did you see what happened to the Challenger?" So that's my recollection. Well, he tells a story of a professor. The day after the Challenger disaster, he had his students write down where they were and what they were thinking the day before. And then not 20 years later, 2 years later, he got those students back together again and asked them, what were you doing the day of the Challenger? And many of them got it completely wrong. But the strange thing was, there were students who got it completely wrong who said they were right today and what they wrote 2 years earlier was wrong. What's the chances of that? But that's what you've heard people, you're probably your grandparents. I know exactly where I was when Kennedy was assassinated. 9/11, y'all probably know people, y'all don't remember 9/11, but I think I know exactly where I was on 9/11. I can picture it. But he's saying there's things where we're absolutely certain, and you go back and test it, you actually discover that people's memories are incredibly unreliable. And so his main point is kind of ask, why are we like that? Why does the human brain do that? Latch on to something we're absolutely certain about something when we're not certain. We really don't know. But if y'all read that book, let me know if I should put it on my reading list. It's like 3 really good chapters and a bunch of chapters where you're like, okay, please get to the point. So it's a little tedious in places. But a good decision works out well, and we tell people, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. I could just see it coming. I think it was funny in the investment society, we bought Whole Foods, and we had talked about Whole Foods getting bought out, but it was pretty kind of a side, just, yeah, maybe someone would buy them out. And then Amazon bought them out. I remember hearing the investment society member going, yeah, we talked about that, and we could just see that coming, and boy, we jumped in on that one. It's like, no, we never did that. Now, was he lying? I don't think he was. I think in his mind, yeah, because we had mentioned it in his mind saying, yeah, that's the reason. That's not the reason we bought Whole Foods, but some reason he put in his mind. Why? Because it's a good outcome. But then we have bad luck for our bad outcomes. And then even worse, when our friends have good outcomes, we say they were just lucky. And when they had bad outcomes, we say, yeah, they had it coming. That's how our egos work. And we do that. Why? Because we want to feel good about ourselves. The human ego wants to feel good about itself. We rationalize our decisions to make us look better to ourselves, make ourselves look better versus others. If you know that, then what she's arguing you need to do is find another way to reward your ego. You know you have egos want to feel good. Find another way to reward them than this. And she'll talk about that a little bit later. So what's the most important thing you got to do here is distinguishing between decision quality and luck. So what she's saying is, how can we do that? And it's not always fun, because there's sometimes we make a decision and it works out. We really want to say it was decision quality. We don't want to say it's luck. And she says that's bad because you're going to make a worse decision in the future. And sometimes bad things happen because we made a bad decision, and we got to be able to own up to that as well, or we're going to make worse decisions going back. So she's saying this is the focus of the book. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, but I want you to add this to your priority. Your goal is decision quality. Have you ever thought that before? I got to become a better decision maker. Has that ever crossed your mind? That's what I had to change my life to become a better decision maker. That's what she's saying. I don't know if I ever thought that. I was so in the clouds in high school and middle school. All right, so here's the mistakes. So she's going to give you the mistakes, then the solutions. All right. And the biggest one she talks about is resulting, hindsight bias, not thinking in a probabilistic way, ignoring skewing. Taylor talks quite a bit about that. We just talked about protecting our egos, ignoring opportunity costs, and then motivated reasoning, which happens quite a bit. So this is probably, she says, this is the thing people most hate about her presentations is this football game. So Seattle's behind by 4, so a field goal doesn't tie them. They need a touchdown. There's how many seconds left? 22 seconds left. They got the best running back in the NFL on the 5-yard line. What do? You run it, obviously. What did they do? They passed it, interception. The next day, the headlines, stupidest call in NFL history. What a horrible call. What would the headlines have been the next day if he had passed it for a touchdown? Brilliant call, caught him off guard. They were expecting a run. They did a pass play. And so she's saying, how do we assess this decision? Is it based on decision quality or is it based on the outcome? She calls that resulting. Now, when I watch the play, it's like, why did he pass it right in the middle of the field? You know, I would have done the UT Austin thing, which never worked, but they never had interceptions where you have the guy running to the corner and you throw it to the corner and always overthrow him. But at least, you know, you don't have an interception. So when they you threw it right in the middle of the field, didn't even surrounded all these people. So you kind of had to question that. So I don't know about that decision quality, but I see her point. How we assess the decision that he made. What was his name? Pete? What was the coach? Oh, Pete Carroll. How do we assess this decision? You know, all of us that, you know, obviously we're all experts in coaching, much, you know, we're all equal to Pete Carroll. My word, what does he know? We can certainly criticize him from the couch. But we assess this decision.
You still make millions no matter what.
Yeah, well, he may not. Well, he probably cared about this one, but you know, the other thing, you know, you think about, she also talks about the opportunity cost and all that, is there's a lot more here you have to think about. What's the probability of a penalty on a pass versus run? What's the probability of fumble versus an interception? The other advantage of the pass, if it's incomplete, what's the advantage there? You're gonna get one extra play. That's pretty huge, isn't it? You think Pete Carroll is maybe thinking that, hey, let's try the pass. Costs us a couple of seconds, but we still got 2 more run plays. We do a run play, we only have 1 more run play, so we're out of time. You know, that might be a good decision. He's making all those decisions with 22 seconds left, so he doesn't, you know, this is a pretty tough decision, and he made a decision. It didn't work out. You can argue whether it's the right decision or not. That's not what she's arguing. She's arguing how we're assessing the decision. We're not just assessing the decision itself, we're just assessing the results and then applying that to the decision quality. Given the importance of luck, it is unfair to assess decision quality based entirely on outcomes. There can often be very low correlation What was your, so she's done this. She asked people, what was your highest quality decision last year? And they won't tell her that. They'll tell her their best outcome from last year. I bought this stock and went up 40%. Well, why did you buy it? Oh, I bought it because of this or that. Well, you didn't know that when you bought it. So how did you make it on that decision? It's like, yeah, I knew they're going to do really well with this product, but you didn't. They announced that product 2 weeks after you bought the stock. There's how could you know that? So, but she actually found one guy who was talking about this decision he made and how bad her decision was, and she sat down with him and says, okay, here's what you knew, here's the decision you made, and at the end of it, he's going, yeah, that was a good decision. It blew up on us, but it was actually a really good decision. And she convinced them to reassess. Hindsight bias, where are we on time? Is this clock right? 8:31. All right. Hindsight bias. We see an outcome as an inevitable consequence of our decision rather than a probabilistic one. We see the world as orderly when it really isn't. We ignore false positives, a good result after a bad decision, and false negatives, a bad result after a good decision. We jump to the assumption of causation. That's a huge one, right? We like to think A causes B. We talked about that in my P&C class. We asked, why do P&C companies use credit scores for auto insurance? Does your having a good credit score cause you to be a good driver? So, hey, I got my credit scores fixed. I paid off my debt. I'm going to be a really good driver now. Does that sound like a normal conversation? What do the actuaries say? We don't care about causation. We want responsible drivers. It just so happens responsible drivers also are responsible with debt. We can't gauge responsible drivers, but we can gauge responsible debt holders. So it's not causation, there's a relationship, but we often do assign causation when there's no reason for causation to be there. If we assign causation, then we're going to make a worse decision the next time. We cherry pick data, confirm our biases. And she brings up Kahneman in this book. This is almost like Kahneman applied to real life. Kahneman, you have a box of dishes. That's not all that real life. She's talking more real life stuff. So she says we need to be more deliberative. We need to really think about it and not just say, hey, it started like this, it ended like this. Obviously, these are all linked, made the right decision. She says not seeing the world probabilistically. I think even more importantly is not speaking probabilistically. I really encourage you as finance majors to start using probabilistic terms as you're speaking. I think the biggest thing that does is it gets your ego out of the equation, gives you an out. So, yeah, I think that's probably going to happen 60%, but I think there's a chance here. And then when it doesn't work out, you've got that out. So give your ego a chance to escape. Stop seeing the world as a series of objective black and white events. Focus on the process, not on the outcome. Shifting probabilistic language. When a low probability, she says language. When a low probability event happens, we can say without shame that we were not wrong. So 2016, where to get my years? 2000, the Trump election. There's all these articles about how bad the pollers were. Because they said Trump had like a 45% chance of winning. Isn't that shocking that something has a 45% chance happens? Does that mean they were wrong? It sounds like their polling could have been very much right, but people are telling you, oh, what did they mess up? What did they get wrong? Thinking in probabilities protects our egos, moving from you were right to you were right and you were wrong language. Yeah, oh, there it is. I forgot I had that in there. So the polls show significant probability for Brexit. Brexit was the other one people were shocked about. The interesting thing with Brexit is the day they held the poll had a huge impact. There were some pretty anti-Brexit voters who had some bad weather on that day. And sometimes just the day of the week that you hold the poll can have a huge impact. I don't know about the 2000, which year was it? The Gore-Bush election, but essentially a tie, right? Especially in Florida, essentially a tie. One day difference could have had a radical. That's what bothers people about democracy is like, it's not the people's choice. It's just pure random chance And you get kind of shocked, in democracies, how the outcomes can change dramatically just because the stock market happened to be up 2% on that day. People are happier, so they vote for the incumbent or whatever. We're really we're at the mercy of a lot of just noise going on. Ignoring skewing. So Taylor talks about this. It's not just what you think is more likely, but it's also the distribution of that more likely. So sometimes you're more likely for the upside than the downside, but if the downside happens, it's going to be huge. That's going to change your decision. So understanding the distribution, so start thinking in terms of distribution. Going for the long shot with much less than 50% chance because the payoff is potentially huge. That's kind of the optionality side of finance. Playing the highest probability can be an error if the long shot is potentially devastating. Taylor talks about that. We like stuff that's real nice and stable, even though every once in a while it just completely blows up. Why? Because it just makes us feel better because we're right more often. And then protecting egos. I don't know where I find these pictures. When you see something protecting egos, it's like, what do I Google to get an image? So that's a pretty good image, isn't it? We don't want to look for decision errors when the outcome's good. We don't feel like it. We assume skill drove good outcomes. Being wrong hurts twice as much as being right feels good. So we don't like blaming ourselves because that's getting back to what Kahneman talks about with prospect theory. Reducing positive vibes. So this is what you recommend is find a way to change how you reward your egos. Reducing positive vibes that come from wins to reduce the hurt ego that comes from losses can improve our contentment. Are you willing to give up some of the praise for a good outcome? So Soros is famous for this in the Soros Diary, and I do recommend you try this. Is every decision you write down why you made it, put everything down, all the reasons, and then after the decision's over, go back and reassess it. We tried that in Investment Society. It was really, really good and incredibly time consuming. So I stopped doing it. But I would write down what stock do we want to buy? What are we selling? Why are we buying this one? Why are we selling this one? And then 3 months later, I would look and see, oh, the one we sold is up 20%. The one we bought is up 4%. Okay. Why did we buy this one and sell that one? Okay. Wow. We were wrong on these. We're just wrong everywhere or whatever. It's painful to do that. It's time consuming, but supposedly Soros, that's kind of, I don't know if that's the trick to his success, but supposedly he does that. So can you get your egos out of your decisions? Because it's really going to destroy you if you don't. Opportunity costs. Opportunity costs is when we lose from not doing B because we instead do A. A lot of times we'll do A and it works out well. We'll say, wow, great decision. And then we don't realize, wow, we've done B. You're not going to know that in your careers. That's the unfortunate. Don't you wish, well, maybe you don't wish that, 20 years from now, you could turn on TV and see where you would have been if you'd been an accounting major. Any of y'all want that or not? That'd be too painful. What if I'd taken this job instead of this job? Any of y'all want to turn on the TV and see, oh, I would have been a billionaire, but hey, at least I got 27,000 in the bank, so I'm happy. I don't know. That'd probably be pretty painful. How many futures of you are there? Several billion, right? What's that philosophy about the cat dying in the box? I've never understood that one. I should go back and read it. Y'all know what I'm talking about? All these parallel universes. So there's some version of you out there that's just really having a time right now. Some decision, you don't know about it because you didn't go back and reassess it. Opportunity costs create bets against our future selves. All decisions contain risk, even those with good outcomes, because an even better outcome could have been missed. This kind of gets back a little bit to that bounded rationality. We don't have enough time to assess everything and really figure out what was better, what was worse. But what she's trying to get you to do though is to think about it. Stop praising your ego and really sit down and honestly think about, was A really better than B? So yeah, this was painful in Investment Society because we buy a stock, sell a stock, and that stock would go up 10% and say, hey, look at how great we did. We don't go back and figure out the other stocks up 20. Maybe we should do that. That's really, really painful to do. Motivated reasoning. The quality of our decisions depends on the quality of our beliefs and knowledge. We need to work on getting better information. This is a lot of Hubbard here. improve the accuracy of our beliefs. A lot of times we don't want something to be true, so we skew everything so that the other comes out versus one thing I think is key to risk management is just this incredible, brutal honesty, where you just like, you admit, I'm in the camp that we don't know anything. I read Stephen Hawking's, Stephen Hawking's. He's the one in the wheelchair. I get Richard Dawkins. Yeah, Stephen Hawking's, his History of Time. Brilliant, brilliant man. At the end of the book, I'm going, man, we don't know much. This is like the smartest guy on the planet, or he was. He doesn't know anything. And he knows a lot compared to the rest of us, but he doesn't know much. I'm thinking, wow, we're really pretty ignorant human beings. There's very little we know. I mean, the most important question of all in all of science is, why does anything exist? Has anyone given you a good answer for that? I heard one scientist says, well, it's because emptiness is unstable. And it's like, that makes no sense to me. It seems like emptiness, nothingness would be really, really stable, but we don't know much, and we don't admit that we don't know much. In fact, you watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, you hear a lot of people who know everything, and they telling us all about it. And I'm convinced we just don't know anything. So we need to admit that we don't know much. We need more information. We believe much without any basic facts. So that on being certain, he talks a lot about that, how quickly we come to a conclusion. When I was doing the presentation here, I wanted some examples on Facebook of people posting stuff on Facebook that just, there's no way that could be true, and yet they're posting it as fact. The first one I saw was one of my friends, I guess friends from high school. I've never met this person in my life, but she friended me, and all her friends were high school friends. So I said I must have run into her in the hall. I didn't recognize the name. But she put a picture of Whoopi Goldberg wearing this t-shirt that was just horrendously horrible t-shirt. And my Bayesian logic, the first thing I said is, there's no way she wore that t-shirt. That has to be Photoshopped. That was the first thing that came to my mind. As it's Whoopi Goldberg, it wouldn't make sense for her to do that, right? It would destroy her career. She's a smart person. Obviously, she's very successful. So I go Google it, and sure enough, I find a website with Whoopi Goldberg showing the actual shirt she was wearing and saying it was Photoshopped. But this person put it in there and said, no, this is Whoopi Goldberg. This is what she wore. I was about to do You Want to Bet, which is one of Annie Duke's. I bet you $100 she wasn't wearing that shirt. But one of the guys I ran high school track with, he came on first, a guy named Patrick. He said, you're an idiot, this is not true. And he really let her have it. So I said, I actually liked his response. I want to be in on the game there. But her response to his complaint was, well, maybe she didn't wear the shirt, but that's the kind of thing she would do. Thinking, this is so idiotic, isn't it idiotic? It's just so stupid. I was thinking, I'm not like a Whoopi Goldberg fan or anything, but it's just like, it just was obvious to me. That's the Bayesian logic, right? It doesn't make sense that she'd wear that shirt. And we're getting to a point where it's not even Photoshop, it's video shopping. We're not going to be able to trust anything. And so the first thing your mind should do is what? Does it make sense that she would have done that? We'll talk a little bit more about these, but for this presentation, I wanted to find 2 or 3, and after a week, I had like 20 of them. So I could find so many of them. All right, we'll finish the Annie Duke.